Good morning and welcome to Managing Change. Good morning and welcome to Managing Change. This is Ronald Allen, and I am your host for the next 60 odd minutes. And we're going to talk everything about life's challenges. So, why would we want to do that at 6 o'clock in the morning? Well, our aim and purpose is a continuation of the last, I would say, 12 to 13 years of broadcasting information that can help the average person who's going through some form of life's changes. And we're going to punctuate our programming with guests from time to time, methodologies and strategies that you can apply right here, right now. I'm a big proponent of the steak and not just the peas. Although in today's healthy living climate, the peas are preferred. So we're going to jump right in. Why am I continuing to do this kind of work? Well, throughout my entire life, I've always been fascinated by people's behaviors, how we are impressionable, how we impress ourselves on others, and why we feel, in many cases, restricted. I've had the good fortune of working in the mortgage banking industry and seeing the diversity of interests when people come to invest their funds in large pieces of real estate, whether it was commercial, industrial, of course, residential, and everything in between. It is the intent of the parties that is of interest, that is of importance. And communication is the underlying, shall I say, venue that we need to understand, and to develop and be sensitive to. The word sensitive here, though, is the linchpin. It is the strength between two or more people when they come to engage in any kind of activity, whether it's personal, self talk, and we'll talk about multiple strategies that we engage in every day, unconscious and consciously, in order to get desired outcomes. Engagement with our loved ones. We know in family dynamics, for example, it is how we're introduced to society, how we're introduced to our family members that in many respects determines the rest of our lives and the experience we're going to have. So that's a huge area that across different cultures, different nationalities, and with one another, how we are forged, our personalities are forged. Of course, when we go out into society, in business, in working with different groups, sororities, fraternities, etc., then we start to see how we replicate that behavior, that programming. Some people call it propaganda, socialization. We'll touch on those areas. We'll touch on the cultural development of people over time and how they slot themselves in based on that conditioning. Most importantly, we also realize that there's an opportunity here once we start to recognize that our lives are not where we want them to be, or we're not exhibiting the type of benefits. Then there's a whole other construct that we can begin to look at, such things as strategic interventions, modalities of behavior that allow us to become the agent of change. Some people use the term transformation. I like the term engagement, and I'll give you a reason. I'll give you a story, if you will. Have you ever looked at a kindergarten where children are playing, children are discovering for the first time many aspects of their lives that project their personalities into the future, and you can see how they interact with one another? Well, I've worked with young adolescents, I call them young minds, and I found that they're in this discovery zone, this area of I want to explore, touch, feel, smell. And if that is allowed to develop, if that is encouraged to develop, we find that they have a more healthy outlook. Interestingly enough, in science research of the mind, we find that the brain itself needs to constantly forage learning. So people refer to it as the brain likes to forage for new information, for complementary information. They want to validate and test, as in a litmus test, that what they're doing is important, is contributory to their social community. If we continue to search and allow ourselves to be in an exploratory mode of thought, our bodies are healthier, our minds are excited. We wake up in the morning, and as I'm hearing the birds right now, and it's just 6 o'clock in the morning, the chatter tells me that they are fervently looking towards their day. Now, that in and of itself is also extremely important. Think of when you wake up, what's your initial feeling? What's your initial emotional expression to yourself? Many people, unfortunately, do not look forward to the day, to the morning. And so there is a disconnect. We want to share with you some ideas, some conversations. We welcome you to respond. We would love to have your engagement. Since we're using StreamYard for the first time, and I believe we've done a few tests here to make sure that it's working well. If you are on the line, by all means, let us know. Give us a little shout out. Share with us your thoughts and concerns. Another area we're going to discuss is meditation. What do you do? Here's a question for you. What do you do the first thing you wake up when you come out of that alpha state? You've been in a slumber. Perhaps you've had a restless night. Maybe you've been counting those sheep jumping over the moon. Perhaps they're jumping over Mars now, right? What state are you waking up in? And how do you anchor yourself so that you begin to map out your day? We'll touch on mapping, mind mapping also in this program. It is important to meditate. What is your form of meditation? Could it be getting on one of those proverbial bicycles and riding into the sunset of a visual stimulation screen? Or is it walking the dog? Is it listening to the birds, as I just mentioned? They are communicating. It is all about communication. It's sensory. It's the smell that we get when we brew that first cup of coffee. I personally like tea. Although I must admit, we've actually started drinking, I say started about a year or two now, Malunga tea, and it's a herb from, I believe, Thailand that is very tasteful with honey. You can add a little lemon for flavoring if you care to. Again, it's the rituals that we engage in that communicate to ourselves that we are worthwhile, that we are worthy. Don't underestimate that, especially those of us who are getting older. We need to remember that childhood experience in the kindergarten where we are exploring, we are touching, feeling, looking out, reaching out. The mind demands it. Otherwise, we become claustrophobic in our thinking. We become parochial in our view of life. And we begin to refrain from external stimulation. It is a challenge. It's a challenge that if we look outside ourselves and see other forms of life, I like to refer to them as nature's best. Others refer to it as animals. Quite a primitive description there. And the reason why I choose to use that expression, nature's best, is because they are focused on life, certainly reproduction, certainly finding a mate, certainly finding food. They are on purpose and they don't question their behavior. What can we learn from that? That's another form of communication. We know, by the way, that 80+% of human communication is non-verbal. Now, there is a difference. There is non-engagement until we feel safe when we come into a foreign environment, when we come into a new environment, even when we come into an environment that we're invited to, albeit maybe remote or physical environment, we still give off an aura of, I'm not ready to engage yet. That is a form of communication. And we're definitely going to dig into that because that is probably one of the most revealing aspects of our socialization, of our mental capacity to assess, evaluate, and then engage on purpose. We're also going to talk about how we can communicate just with our positioning of our bodies. Absolutely incredible stuff that we've learned from research over time and in different cultures, where in some cases, you're not allowed to present yourself or be heard. That in and of itself is another form of engagement, of transformation, of moving from one stage where you cannot be part of that conversation or socialization to a stage where you're saying, hey, I'm accepted and I'm part of the conversation, which is absolutely crucial, once again, for our mental health. Why else? Got some notes here, of course. I hope you will take some notes as you go through this each and every morning. It's a way of starting off. Meditation is a way of starting off your day, managing your state. And there are many forms. There's yoga, there's physical exercise, there's conversation you have with yourself. We call that self-talk. These are some incredible tools that in many cases are undervalued. We'll say, especially in the West, I've done that already. I've already, I know that. Knowing it and improving that level of engagement, that level of acceptance, that discovery, as I mentioned, as you go through life, meanings, purpose, intent does change. Yet there are some fundamentals that we can always draw on. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. So let's take a look at some other information here. This is interesting. Mapping your mind for success. Now, you said managing life's changes is all about engagement. We said in the morning when we wake up, we want to engage on purpose. We use the term meditation. Meditation is not just being quiet, it can be actually quite overt. And I'll ask you to consider this. And this is taken from ProSci's change management methodology. And it's one of the very first steps that I found very interesting and useful, very useful to people no matter what stage of life you're in. So there are 5 words that identify whether you are aware of, capable of, and are ready for change. Now, the irony is none of us want to change. That's very blatant, right? We don't want to change. We get into a rhythm, we get into a mode of both thinking and actions, rituals, daily rituals. And of course, life will send us a curveball, right? Things will change. So what if we remove the word change and said managing engagement? It's similar to the exchange of the word control for manage. Control means and alludes to absolute, right? I control this environment. I control my behavior. I control people. I control an outcome. Yet we've learned that outcomes and the process to get to an outcome can have multiple, shall I say, tangents and adjustments, right? So you're looking to buy a car, then you find out that the financing is different, the credit is a little higher, or the payments are higher than you want. Maybe the type of car that you want is not what you started off with. All of these are changes to the desired outcome. In my work with project managers, constant change, constant adjustments. So if we said we're going to engage with, back to project management in a moment, we're going to engage with practitioners who are going to help us manage and engage effectively as opposed to control the process. Maybe that allows us to take off a certain amount of pressure that we might otherwise subconsciously impose on ourselves and be more flexible. So let's jump in here. The first one is aware. Are you aware of the need for change? And I'm going to I'm going to refer to the big tsunami that's going on right now with this pandemic. A lot of people are saying they want to go back to normal. And I'm going to ask you to reflect a moment and say to yourself, a rhetorical question, if you will, was that really all that it's set up to be? Or was it better than what you have now? And then I'm going to ask you to think another step. What does the current state of affairs say about your capabilities? Because life is always going to challenge us. Life is always going to come at us from the right field and the left field or our blind spots. You see, what I've realized is when a situation that we're currently experiencing has come about on us, it tells us about our resourcefulness. It tells us about our adaptabilities. It tells us about our willingness to look at ourselves and realize that, you know what, maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought. Maybe I'm not doing what I should be, what I could be doing, what I'm capable of. I can stretch elasticity, right? I can stretch a little more. I can apply myself a little more aggressively. So awareness is the need to address the reality that you're facing and not give yourself some illusion that it's not happening and woe is me. And we're going to get into certain words of, Blue Monday, Hump Day Wednesday, and thank God it's Friday. Where do those terms come from? And have you asked yourself, why do you accept and or adopt those terms? Are they really helpful? Your desire. Well, back to when you wake up in the morning, your desire to have bacon and eggs, which I grew up with. I grew up with bacon and eggs, English sausage. Are you willing to wake up on purpose and manage your state, manage your morning? You desire certain things, and we prefer not to experience other things. Where does the meaning come from how we associate and allocate those meanings? And are we capable of changing them? This is mental work that requires you to be on point. Some people will say it's hard. That in and of itself, saying it's hard, takes you in a different direction. So as much of the work I've done with people and organizations, the traditional language, the words we use, the expressions we give out, take us down one path. We have to arrest that and manage, not control, manage our own self-talk, manage our expression to those we're engaged with, and begin to build mental fortitude, build that resilience, build that resourcefulness. Knowledge is our past and current knowledge capable of helping us to move forward. So, for example, something totally seemingly abstract. I remember when cars actually had points and they were a function in a car that allowed it to, for the engine to run at a certain timing, synchronization, if you will. Well, today cars don't have that. So I don't try to go in and fix cars. I don't try and fix engines. I used to do playing around with them. I was never a great mechanic, and I didn't like to tinker around. in engines. I do, and I did, and I do enjoy the uh, engineering of cars, right? I mean, it's incredible how you can put all these components together and they take you down the road at 200 miles an hour, right? I went to Brickyard once, Indianapolis, and went into the museum and I saw the history of these engineers putting these mechanical machines together and making their components work perfectly together. Well, the knowledge to do that comes from a willingness to learn, a desire, an interest. Do we have that same level for our lives? Or has our own educational system stripped that away from us and discounted its importance? Yes, we need to make a living. Yes, we need to have basic knowledge. What's more important, I submit, is the ability to develop your interest in something and let it just take off. Take off by looking for knowledge that is not right in front of you, is not presented to you in an academic environment, knowledge that is found in remote places with remote people that you wouldn't think of. That, by the way, is part of the benefit of social media. We can reach people across the world in places that typically you might not even think that they have an interest. Not only do they have an interest, they probably bring a methodology, a strategy, a competency, a resourcefulness that you don't see where you are or among your peers. You know, it's interesting how we love to say third world countries, and the people in those so-called third world countries, which we can also, in fact, say certain parts of America are certainly third world mentalities. They are still living, they are still engaged, they are still socially connected. So it's our description of that, once again, back to communications. Ability, do we have the ability? You may want to do something. I will never be an astronaut, although I might have the ability eventually to get into space because of technology, because of the price point that the lay person, the average person, may be able to pay in order to get into space. Yet when they landed on the moon, Apollo 11, and I even have pictures of it because as a kid I loved NASA. It was unthinkable, let alone a price point to offer it to people obviously very wealthy at the time, at this time, even at this time. So there is a communication going on, right? One time it was just for scientists and NASA and the engineers of the world who came together to build spacecraft that could put a man on the moon. Then, because of technology, because of the cost of putting that journey, that voyage, that trip, same thing with shipping, right? At one time it was just merchants and for economic benefit, and then they saw commercialization. Again, we're communicating, we're discovering that things become more accessible the more we develop processes, the more we develop resources so that more and more people can engage. And of course, reinforcement. As in any learning, as in any incentive package, you must have reinforcement. And typically we look for positive reinforcement. So those are 5 aspects when we talk about change. We talk about engagement, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. The reinforcement must be appropriate, a stimulus, an incentive, something that evokes a desire to be engaged and involved. Moving along, the big topic that I've been studying now for about 2 years. And it's a gentleman out of Texas by way of, I believe, Chicago. He's a psychiatrist. And he's been involved in a group of, a body of study with a group of people. And what's interesting is that it speaks to the psychology of survival. The term is solution-focused brief therapy. It's also referred to as solution-focused brief questions. And what I love about it is when you think of people who are incarcerated, when you think of people who go through human trafficking, when you think of people who have been subjected to slavery, servitude, um, the feudal system mentality, the colonization mentality that most of us, pretty much all of us, have come up under, whether you're in China with dynasties, whether you're in India and Pakistan with the untouchables, and of course with the European colonization mentality. The one thing that survives, that allows people to survive, is thinking into the future. If you think of the past and the present, then you're kind of doomed, right? There's not much you can do, the past and the present. That next moment, you can. The moment after the first, second, third, minute, hour, day, week, month, you can do something about that. First, it must start in the mind. And in solution focused brief therapy and the studies that I've been engaged in, and the people, psychiatrists, sociologists, counselors, and coaches, they find it more of a challenge than the actual studies because we haven't been introduced to the world, to life, to the subject matter, and including mental health, because that's really where it's applied. We haven't been introduced to these studies in this way. Cognitive behavioral therapy is problem based. What did your mommy and daddy do? What were you subjected to? Okay, so I regurgitate that stuff, but does that allow me to think forward to my future best self, which is an expression we use? Does it allow me to consider the feelings that I had when life was good, even for a moment? We communicate that to ourselves. And most applications today are problem based. So, how can you come out? How can you have a positive expectation of your future? Solution focused brief therapy says, what are your best hopes for the moment that we're going to spend? Not 5, 10 years out, because most people don't have that capacity to think in that fashion because of their past. On the other hand, they might, over half an hour, they might go back and look at when was the last time you felt positive about yourself? Never. So you've never felt good about yourself? No. Okay, so what would it feel like? I have no idea. What would you like it to feel like? That's a divergent question. You're constantly probing to listen to that person's self talk that says, I can vaguely, faintly remember a time when I had a desire, an interest, a hope. Then you develop that. But at the same time, you, the individual, parent, guardian, social worker, it doesn't really matter. Credentials don't give you the preferential treatment. It does say that you're invested in this methodology, and I find it refreshing that the average person who wants to grow, who wants to be engaged, who wants to learn, who wants to get out of the situation that they've been experiencing, they can apply this. Moreover, the work that I've done with youth who are developmentally and behaviorally challenged, they already have it. They simply need the fertile soil so that they can nurture it. You know why I say they already have it? Because they haven't committed suicide. Yes, I bring up that aspect of life. In my own family, I've had many family members over the decades, over generations, who have committed suicide. That's a very serious realization. And so my search is earnest. My passion, my passion is that no more. because someone didn't speak to them, someone didn't communicate with them, didn't connect with them, didn't engage with them. There was a disconnect. I have lost family members as much as I've tried to reach out, and there was a disconnect. And in some cases, the disconnect is socially created. I mentioned earlier about colonization, colonialism. It is a stripping away of our identity. It is the bastardization of people. It is the cannibalization of people. That is a direct communication. We're not just talking fundamentals and technicals here. Good morning, how are you? How do you address a letter? Dear sir, ma'am. That's basic stuff. I'm referring to the mental state that we're introduced to life and how it reverberates from generation to generation to generation, as in the research by anthropologists, by the way. They see constant traits. When you study social movement of people, when you study social societies, socialization of societies, there is a thread, a very wide thread of how systems can repeat behavior from one generation to another, and people are totally oblivious to it. They fight it in the wrong manner. They engage with a misunderstanding of what it is that they're dealing with. And we've seen it. You can go on lots of these social sites on Facebook and various others, and there are multiple subgroups of pain, suffering, suicidal ideation, self-abuse. It's another form of communication that we don't want to talk about. And we will, because we have to talk about the initiation of the mental health industry in America. Why it's come to this, and yet we pour so much money into it. And the percentage of healthy minds that come out is abysmal. We've got data on that. We've got data on this. On a lighter note, as we move into our, let's see, it's only 6:33, my goodness. I want to share with you 13 actionable steps to engage change successfully. And I've actually been using this. I created it myself. I will give credit, of course, and acknowledgement to any material that I share with you. And I will do likewise with material that I create. So these are 13 actionable steps to engage change successfully, right? So we spoke about meditation. We spoke about the importance of waking up and structuring your engagement into your day, how you want your day to go. And some people get up and rock and roll. That was my mother. She was like, come on, let's go. Life is waiting. It's not going to wait for us. And then there's the opposite. My father, he was like, wait a minute. I got to see what the temperature's like, which way the wind is blowing. I need my umbrella. I need a mattress. I need a parachute. I love teasing him because I found the opposite personalities of my parents only, I would say, when I was in my late 30s. I began to understand the benefit of opposites. When they say opposites attract, I gotta have my tea a second. Opposites attract. The challenge is to develop an appreciation and an understanding of when to apply them, those opposite personalities and opposite approaches in life, right? So typically, if you want to get up and be cautious, that's fine. At the same time, what if you changed gears and said, no, I'm going to communicate to myself and say, no, I'm going to go for it. Whatever it is, whether it's a job, whether it's having fun with your mate, whether it's walking the dog, whether it's reading that book, writing a book, finishing a piece of art, finishing a piece of music. you can take those two opposites, try one, then try the other, and then reverse them. What were the outcomes? What were the risks? What was the benefit? What's interesting about a lot of what we're going to also talk about is we're going to take personal applications and throw them into business environments. And we're definitely going to take business applications and throw them into personal environments. Because of the work I've done in project management, I find that the apparatus of project management works incredibly well for those who are struggling on the personal side. While the personal side, behavioral dynamics, of course, impacting business, well, that speaks for itself. Look what is constantly happening over the last 10, 15 years with males preying on females. And these are grown men. These are well-established men. These are well-educated men. Yet there's a behavior, a pathology in their behavior that is very disruptive and destructive, not to themselves, to their families, to their associates, colleagues. And it disrupts communities. It just literally disrupts societies. The issue with Charlie Rose, I used to listen to him. I respected his journalistic prowess. And then to find that his behavior, yes, it's private, at the same time, there is a responsibility. So let's give you these 13 actionable steps so that we can constantly help you build, have you ask yourself questions that we trust you'll begin to work with and develop your own transformation. Does this work for me? Is this something that I'm ready for? Remember what we said with ADKAR, change management from ProSci. So develop an immigrant credo and utilize every opportunity to position yourself to where you want to be. Now, I know in America, they think that us immigrants, as much as I'm naturalized in the United States since 2001, I believe, 2000 actually, just before 9/11. Many people in America think that immigrants are the bane, yet we are all immigrants, even if you are fourth and fifth generation American. That is my point of view, absolutely. Why? Because if we look back at what our ancestors had to do to survive themselves, we may have a little bit more humility towards those that are coming here and are looking to create their own American dream. So develop an immigrant credo and utilize every opportunity to position yourself to where you want to be. Again, forward thinking, forward hope. You will only become the parent when you behave like a parent. I'll give you a quick backdrop on this. Some time ago, my wife Miriam and I were in a bakery. We were getting our little desserts and we're talking to Steve. He's the proprietor for this baker in Burlington City, New Jersey. And a young man comes in, followed by two elderly people. And he seems to be flustered. He seems to be frustrated. And we hear him say, "Well, what do you want?" And immediately I understood what was going on. He was the son, the caregiver of these elderly couple, and he was frustrated. He was tired. He was exhausted. And he looked at us like, "Oh my God, do you believe these people?" And my internal response was, what did they teach you that you're so incapable of recognizing what they need at this time? What are you missing as a young man that you don't recognize that when you walk in with them, with your parents, you should be able to select a dessert, select some items, and say, "Hey, mom, hey, dad, this is what I've got for you. What do you think?" You see, when so-called young adults complain about their parents being too much for them, I cringe and I realize that they're not mature enough. Oh, they may have the credentials for their profession and they may have the job position. The humanity, the capability to become a parent demands that you act in that other person's best interest. It's like a guardian, for goodness sake. Now, people will say, well, why would you say that? Well, again, my wife and I, we put both our parents to rest. They're dead. They're gone. We took care of them. My mother was incontinent for 6 years. We physically took care of her. Was it a toll? Yes. Was it required? Yes. It was an experience that brought me closer to my parents than ever before. Did we do it for all four? No. The guys died quickly. My dad and my father-in-law died real fast. The women took a long time, years. It is understanding that that is your responsibility at that time. And for any young adult to continue to ask mommy and daddy what they want simply means you're not mature enough. And it shows in how young adults, and I'm talking people even in their 40s and 50s, who do not know how to manage their own children, let alone their parents. You must take the reins. You know, we're in an equestrian community out here in New Jersey, Tabernacle, Columbus, Mansfield, and Vincenttown. They all have, or everyone has horses. Everybody has some kind of horse. And this one lady who we've befriended for some years, we were talking to her about horses. And she says, well, the horse is going to control you, or you're going to control the horse. Perhaps not the best analogy for children and parents. It still holds water in my book. We must mature. We must be willing to take on responsibility and the repercussions. You can say whatever you want. Just be mindful what comes back is a result of who and whom you spoke with. The ultimate salesperson's offensive is walkaway power. You know, we've got tons of books on sales. We've got tons of books on being a salesperson. As consumers, we have the ultimate power. Even when you're leasing commercial space, if you're buying John Deere tractors as farmers, we have them right up the road here, Columbus Market. If a salesperson is so obtuse to think that you can't make the decision for yourself and tries to become overbearing, you just ask them for their card. You know, buddy, I like what you're saying. Do you have a card there? I got a jet. I got a jet because you're Kafka. You're talking Kafka. Well, you're being insulting. You're being rude. There's plenty of stories I can share with you that we've experienced. One in particular, we had a puffback where the boiler literally explodes and the smoke goes all over through the house. It was, I think it was not a steam, hot air. That's what it was. And the boiler just, so we had all this smoke all over the house. And this insurance adjuster came, right? And he thinks, well, at the time we were renting. And he says, well, you know, you got to do this and you got to do that. And I said, I'll tell you what, you give me your estimates and I'll call you. But you're just tenants. Oh, wrong expression. Wrong expression. I sent him packing. Just as with car sales, just as with realtors. We had a Remax realtor up in Warren County. Didn't put our security into a savings account. Walked away from that property, and I sent him the state rules and regulations. And I sent it to, by the way, the wife who was a pharmacologist and the husband who was a detective. And I said, the next time you pick a realtor that's informed, pick a realtor that's educated. Having been a realtor, I can say things like that openly. In fact, if I'm not a realtor and I experience the same thing, I can say things like that. I can communicate. I can express myself. And that's what we need more of course, in polite and courteous manner because the whole point of this is that everybody walks away with at least an understanding that it's mutually beneficial. It is a way that we're expressing ourselves, that we wish to be engaged, how we wish to be engaged. Let me continue. If you are serious about helping others, then understand their point of perspective. I know a lot of people work at these soup kitchens, and you may volunteer at various churches, social clubs, organizations. Because I've done similar work, I find that some of the people that come have this misunderstanding that everybody who needs help is somehow, how can I say, a lower class, less capable. Um, they are in need of a handout, and that couldn't be further from the truth. They may need help in one area of their life, yet, and certainly based on their age and life experience, they have strengths that simply need to be reminded, that need to be shored up, that need a little bit of support. So the intent, the communication, the intent is, I'm going to come and learn something, not just to help people who need help. Let's continue. Murphy, I love this Murphy. You know Murphy's Law, where things go wrong, everything will go wrong. Well, that's not the whole truth of that phrase, that fable, if you will. And it was a group of engineers, I believe in England, who had been trying to get a system to work. And after many, many tries, they realized that it was understanding the sequence and the degree of application that they received or achieved the desired outcome. So I have here Murphy. Who is Murphy? Where is Murphy? Kill the Murphy. Because our construct of that saying is negative, right? If something goes wrong, everything will go wrong at the worst possible time. No, it is when things go wrong, we have to look at how the sequence of our application, our conversation, our words, our intent. In fact, you can even step back and say, if I'm elevated with emotional frustration, perhaps I shouldn't even engage. This is not the right time. Another quick story: Henry Kissinger, negotiating with in the 60s and 70s, and he wrote in some of his memoirs that the Americans were so obviously unprepared. They would rent a hotel, and the Vietnamese would lease a chateau, excuse me, would lease a chateau. The communication, the intent is expressed that we're here for the long term, whereas Americans and even the English, who would send ambassadors who do not speak the language to countries to represent their country. The communication is recognized in your lack of preparedness. The communication is recognized in your inability to at least engage on the same level as the culture that you wish to engage with. Here's one. Well, we spoke about third and fourth generation Americans, and anyone actually who comes here, as I have. This is, I guess, if I had children, they would be first generation Americans. Go back in time and seek out a character of your great grandparents' homeland. Seek out a character. It could be your great grandparents. It could be a member, right? And ask yourself, how and what would you engage in to get your family to where you want them to be? If you were back there in their time, if you were subjected to that. It's similar actually to what we said towards the beginning of the program, where I said, with the COVID situation that we're all going through. Is it that it is so bad, or is it that your sense of reality is disconnected? Because these events do occur. We had many in England. We had the hoof and mouth disease back in the late 60s, 70s, where they were feeding cows. Well, cows are vegetarian. You can't feed meat. You know what I mean, right? You can't feed meat to a vegetarian. The stomach doesn't work. The stomach doesn't know how to process it. Question, listen, filter, clarify, engage, learn, and develop. Right back to that kindergarten environment, right? You know, there are a bunch of cars that the American auto industry came out with. What is it? The Navigator, the Discover, the Explorer. I'm not sure the Armada. Nissan, I think Nissan came out with that one, the Armada, because that was purely an economic um, initiative project to acquire land. Whereas the others, when we think of engagement, we think of learning, we think of developing. We're navigating new environments. We are learning about ourselves. We are communicating to learn about ourselves. I was just checking the time here. We are moving along. Seeking out someone who you think needs help and find out how they help you by learning their strengths. Similar to the one above, um, more though to do with identifying their actual strengths. So they found themselves making wrong decisions, and maybe for the last 30, 40 years, they have been running organizations, have done workshops for workforce development groups in the state of New Jersey. And I find that people become disconnected. That's why I choose to do this kind of work. That's why I frame it as managing life's changes. Because at any time, if you're not on purpose, if you're not on point, if you're not paying attention, life will just wipe you out. You know, with insurance, for example, they say we're going to insure your house. But what about wind? What about water? Do you have a clause for that? Okay. We had massive storms in New Jersey, and the coastal towns were hit really hard. And they said, well, water damaged it, but it was the wind that brought the water. And if you don't have an awareness of how entities try to get around paying out, then you become a victim. In our household, we said, there's no such thing as a victim. Well, why would we say that? Well, if you understand and if you're paying attention to the environment you live in, you realize that there are areas of susceptibility, of risk, of vulnerability, and you act accordingly. Now, of course, if you're going through a green light and a Mack truck comes and hits you, you are a victim. If you are driving in an environment and an individual decides to take out a gun and shoot you, you are a victim. Absolutely. At the same time, being aware of the environment we're in requires paying attention. At the end of the day, ask yourself, what intangible asset produced a tangible result for tomorrow? Again, we're looking for the future. We're looking for and positioning ourselves, just like in cricket or rugby, real sports. Not this soccer you call it there. We're anticipating where we want to be. We are looking at, it's very much like business models, right? We talk about this entity called a company, and we say we must build or execute a SWOT analysis. Well, do we do the same thing with our families? Why not? They're significantly more important than the business. Go create something from scratch and share it with others, and then enter into a discussion. Where does that discussion take you, right? Create something, go and create something, whatever, from scratch and share it with others, and then enter into a discussion. Right now, my wife and I are constantly looking and evaluating where we want to go, what we want to do. We know we've got the platform so that we can pretty much live anywhere in the world. The challenge is to build it to a level that we're comfortable. So there are multiple moving pieces, and we're constantly engaging with what we call assets so that we get the type of lifestyle we want, as opposed to ending up in one of the senior living centers, which we abhor. That's a choice. That's a decision. Now you have to work at it. You have to be on purpose. You have to wake up in the morning, you do your meditation, you do your thanks, and then you say, what must I spend my time on? Well, we're coming towards the end of our hour. Every morning, we intend to do a session, a 1 hour session, where we help you prepare for the day, get your mind focused, share with you some methodologies and modalities. There's so much more information we have here. Simple constructs. Why do we wish to engage? Because communication is fundamental. And I'd love to share this book with you because my mother gave this book to me when I was, oh goodness, let's see. I wonder if it's reading properly. Fundamentals of Interpersonal Communication. This was back in 73, and she's got even signed it over to me. Kim Giffen and Bobby R. Patton. Kim Giffen and Bobby R. Patton. This kind of started everything back in 73. And I realized that communications is everything. Look at how our children have morphed to the remote medium, cell phones, tablets, laptops, in which to communicate with, right? We never had it. I have it now, absolutely, and we use it to communicate. In some cases, when you're even speaking to kids, they won't put the camera on themselves. What does that say about self-efficacy, of their self-worth? Moreover, what does it say about, again, the adults and parents? And I know we throw our hands up and say, oh, we don't know, we can't deal with this. Yes, you can, because they are the future. They are your children. They are your offspring. And if we're so quick to give up, what is the communication that we're giving out? What is the message? And the message is not good. It's definitely not good. And we need to fight for it every tooth and nail expression, right? We have to fight for it tooth and nail. Well, I am going to wrap up today's discussion with a quote. Where's my quote book? I have my quote book somewhere here. Ah, here it is. I have my quote book. Yes, unabashedly, as Patricia Fripp, she's the first female president of the National Speakers Association. She says, be unabashed in promoting yourself. And I'm just going to open the book up and see whatever it says. The greatest and noblest pleasure which people, of course it says men, reflection of the time of the quote, but people have in this world is to discover new truths. And the next is to shake off old prejudices. How appropriate. I did not fix this. I just opened the book, right? This is the book. You can find it on my website, ronaldmallen.com. And it is the greatest and noblest pleasure which people, you know, which word is in there otherwise, can have in this world is to discover new truths. And the next is to shake off old prejudices. Frederick the Great, 1712 to 1786. It is still true now, over 100, 200 years, that these quotes are applicable to our lives today. This is Ronald Allen, Managing Life's Changes, and we will see you tomorrow.